really wonderful. I have lots of questions. I'm sure many people do. Just a reminder, we'll have a question and answer session after the morning presenters and also after the afternoon presenters. And again, I'm really thrilled you were able to make it. I'm sorry for everybody who had a delay. This you may not know it, but we had 2 days of rain and snow too up until yesterday at 4 p.m. Nothing like, I'm sure, what a lot of you had to fly through. Our next presenter is Sciscenti from the Oakland Museum.
Check, check.
Radio check.
Check. Hello, everybody. I just want to say about that. I'm from Oakland, so across the bay from where the show was, and I did see the show, and had to contend with what I think we all might contend with, which is when I go see a show, I say don't look at the mouse, just look at the objects. You know, because I want to enjoy it. I'm not working. And I saw the mounts, but they largely disappeared. And I was able to look at that show without necessarily going into work mode, which, you know, for me means that gets an A+. So now for something completely different, as they say. Though I'm presenting soft mounts, this is for long-term storage. And so I'm going to be showing you lots of images. Most of these materials everybody here will be familiar with. But I've got a couple of templates here. Or case studies. And one is our basket collection, and one is our the hats from our costume collection. And we got conservation IMLS grants to rehouse all this stuff. So we had a couple of goals in mind with this. Well, a number of goals. Essentially, the first goal was to stabilize and support all these objects. And second goal, just as important, would be access. We have a number of researchers, and of course we have curators in and out looking at this stuff. So access was important as well as safe storage. So here's a shot. The last two shots were of the mounts and the objects in their final state. This is the baskets in our shelving there. That's Tara, one of our registrars, who taking down one of these baskets. So access for registrars and not directly handling the artifacts as they were taking it in and out of storage is a big deal, but we also have a big push for community access. So often non-staff members will come in and look, particularly in our NAGPRA process. And as part of that, we have Native American Council who here came in and curated last year our basket density wall, which has over 200 baskets in it. And they function as the basket experts and as the curators. And we were able to transport more than 200 baskets from our climate control storage to the galleries themselves and have the whole process run and not be able. We didn't have to actually handle the mounts until we actually installed them. So it's kind of a big deal. So the materials are all going to be pretty familiar. All soft stuff, foam, back rod, Tyvek, cardboard, batting. We got good use out of an impulse sealer, get to that later. Bamboo skewers, cotton and polyester stockinette, tape, hot glue, twill tape rather, Mylar, magnets, and Okay, so I'm going to start with the baskets, and this shot was actually taken during the installation of the baskets, or during the rehousing of it. And so you can see that each basket hat in this shot, these are all hats, got their own individual storage tray. Okay, so here's the specs on this one. Our collection is 2,582 baskets and growing. So we did those with 4 technicians, 1 registrar in 6 months. So concentrated labor. That's our shot of shame. This is the reason why we needed these grants. Open shelving. Please note that the baskets, in addition to not having any mounts, were in plastic bags, and this was a problem for us. Many of the baskets, if not most, we assumed most, had been treated with mercury in an earlier conservation treatment to keep insects away. So the plastic bags trap mercury gas, and so our first step in this was to set up a ventilated area where we could essentially release all these baskets and let the mercury off gas. This is the after shot. Compactor shelving, which we had constructed and put in our space, and everything's got its own shelf. There's the same hats happily on their shelf. So many of these mounts are really elaborate, and how elaborate they were depended on conservation requirements, whether there were complicated elements of the baskets, or whether, and this was kind of important, whether there were any breaks and in the baskets. We've had a lot of baskets that were broken, as you might imagine from that earlier storage shot. And so we were asked to stabilize all of them. But the majority of these baskets, in fact, were very simple. You're looking at a Pomo basket. It's got a flat bottom. It's a very simple mount. Most of the mounts that we made were simple in this way. And we used a ethafoam tray with a backer rod, which was skewered into the tray. Please note that also we put the accession numbers and registration tags right into the tray just for easy identification. And I'm just going to quickly run through a technique of a simple mount for this Plymouth basket bowl. The feature of this bowl is that it has a round bottom, as opposed to that Pomo basket with it, which is flat. Now, many of these techniques were passed to us by a conservator named Tom Fuller, who works in the Bay Area and is somewhat of a specialist in this kind of mounting. So just want to acknowledge him. So we started with making the basket, making the tray. 1-inch ethafoam might seem a little overbuilt for such a small basket, but essentially the ethafoam forms a foundation for the bamboo skewers. We use skewers to, as you'll see, to affix the mount elements. So my first step with this one is just to mark the footprint of the bottom of the mount. Skewers come in handy here, moving the basket, and then cutting out a divot. Then I would cut a slit entirely around that divot, the circumference of the divot. It's about a 1/2-inch slit into the ethafoam. Fill the divot with polyester batting, and then tie that to just larger than the circumference or the diameter of the slit itself. And then using a bolt burnisher, just simply tie that in. So what I end up with is essentially a recession that's padded for the basket to sit in. The next step is we take back a rod and place it, shape it somewhat, and place it right up against the basket, and while holding it in place, skewer it. So the skewers were a big deal in this one, and it allowed us to do a lot. The skewers not only allowed us to fix the mount elements to the trays with the basket in place, but they also function as structural elements, as later slides will show. It allowed for less handling of the baskets, and also when the skewers are clipped off, they essentially disappear. We press the angle cutter into the foam and then clip. And the material springs back, which essentially protects the objects from the rough edges of the skewers. So this was helpful. We did use hot glue when necessary, but we stayed away from hot glue generally with this one. So I'd like to show just a series of interesting mounts, at least interesting to me. This is a mount for one of those basket hats. It involves hot glue and skewers, a little double ring there. And there's a hat halfway on top of it. These baccarat rings were used frequently. This is a raised ring, which accommodates the profile of this Paiute canteen. Another canteen handled a little bit differently. This one is just on its side. So the mount features a raise at the foam, and you can probably see the skewer ends that are clipped off just below the level of the E-foam. And it just essentially forms a cradle. This is a very heavy object. So I don't know if you can see, but there's actually a double layer of cardboard on the bottom just to make sure that this one is well supported. More complicated mounts. You can see a Tyvek pillow on the top there, double ring, sort of a truncated double ring, and Volara supports for this hat. It's a quadbutyl hat, and it has splits in its rim. Let me see if I can do this part. I see what I'm doing here. Okay, so I've got splits here and here. And some instabilities here, and actually a split over here. So the supports there allow me to support those brakes for the long term. I also did we did a lot of writing right directly on these trays, which not only help position the mount or position the basket on the mount, but warn of any dangers. So what we do with these Volara supports is skewer the supports into the tray and then lift into place. Work very well, and totally removable and replaceable if there looked like there were any problems. And this same technique could lead to some very elaborate mounts. This basket has splits, lateral splits all the way around it. And so the conservators asked us to support it, and so in this case, both the baccarat and the Volara was used sort of like little clips or cranes. What am I looking at? Well, this is a pomo feathered basket, and the mount is so elaborate you can almost not see the basket. However, so what's happening here is this basket is completely covered with tassels made of shell abalone. And the conservators asked us to come up with a way of keeping the tassels not only supported so that they would, the weight would be relieved, but to keep the tassels away from the feathers. And so these are essentially Volara clamps with elaborate instructions as how to release it. Something a little simpler, a little cradle board. Feature of this, or cradle basket, feature of the basket is that the sunshade is only attached at one point. It's meant to move. And the Volara support here just keeps it from moving as the basket's moved on its tray. Please note, again, a Tyvek pillow. This is a winnowing basket. It's very large. It's probably from here to here, it's almost 5 feet. So this is quite large. You can see it maxed out my photo stand. Again, Tyvek pillows. So this is kind of low tech, but we got really good use out of this impulse sealer for this. It's the same impulse sealer that you'd use for plastic bags. Works great on Tyvek. We make an envelope, turn it inside out so at least some of the edges were smooth, fill it with batting, seal it again, and there's the pillow. So there's another shot of that winnowing basket, and just hot glue the pillows directly to the e-foam angles. So I'd like to talk about the hats. Now the hats were mounted subsequent to the baskets. And so we had conceptually a lot of what we did with the baskets in mind, but when we took a look at the hats, we realized we needed to modify what we were doing somewhat because a lot of them are really elaborate. Materials, of course, are quite different. And there were less of them, although in total we had more than 5,000 objects in the costume grant, which allowed us to rehouse all that stuff. The hats, there were 630, took us 1 registrar, 2 technicians, 4 months. So this is what it was like before. These are plexiglass boxes, 3 feet long, about 2.5 feet wide, and the hats were all just simply stacked in there. So we did find some losses, but less than we were expecting. No, but it feels bad. It just feels bad, you know, to like, we did this. I didn't do this, but we did this. Please note the fire chief helmet at the bottom. Here's our after slide, and the same fire chief helmet, now on its individual mount and perfectly happy in powder-coated shelving. Some of the shelving is spent a little bit of money, and it has drawers also that can come out. Again, access was key, and to that point, we measured the trays and the both for the hats and for the baskets. We measured them and made a template, a series of sizes which would work mathematically for the shelf we were working with, so that we could just take up every scooch of space. That is the mount for the fire chief helmet. So a couple of significant differences. We decided to go with cardboard trays instead of the F-foam because we dropped the whole idea of doing everything with the skewers. We used skewers when necessary, but we dropped back to using mostly hot glue. That was mostly a decision of convenience, considering that we were using a lot of Alara, lots of Alara. And it's very difficult in this kind of situation if I were to try to skewer that Alara to the baccarat ring inside. It's very difficult to do that safely. So the decision was made sort of as a group to go with, to back into the hot glue situation. It worked well. Didn't feel like it was dangerous. And gave us lots of options for some pretty elaborate mounts, as you'll see. However, you can see this head. So this is the hats in storage. This is a air raid warden's helmet from World War II, and right there is in black baccarat with skewers. So when we needed to, we did use it. That's Confederate, 19th century, just as an interest. What is it? It's a green hat. It's literally agreed made into a woman's hat in the 1920s, and we used, again, these Filara supports. One of the wings of the hat needed stabilization. It sort of hangs out. This is a good example also of the instructions that we put on the trays. I'd like to show you a technique for another simple hat. This is Maynard Dixon's hat that he painted with. Some of you may know Maynard Dixon was pretty popular in the Southwest and painted here. And this is his actual hat. A lot of these techniques that we developed were sort of developed in situ as we worked, but we did get a lot of help from Denise McDale from the Asian Museum, who came and did a training with us before we started. So we started with a baccarat ring. This is glued, and the seam is protected with mold glued Tyvek there. We'd shape the ring to the interior of the hat there. So it becomes more of an oval. Place on archival cardboard, cut it out, and hot glue, so that we have sort of the basis for the hat ring. And in this case, Volaro was glued to the back rod. Then it simply inscribed the hat with 1/4" Volaro. And another ring of, or another circle of cardboard. And then all three were glued together sequentially. And then those glued to the mount. So pretty simple, this one. Some of them were more elaborate. Please note here the broken sweatband, which we've done the same way as we did with the baskets, which is skewers and velar clamping, just for ease of mounting, and also, our conservators are later going to sort of take a look at that sweatband and see if they can relax it. We use the impulse sealer again, this time for polyester stockinette. It works great. And we use these for head forms. Turn it inside out for a nice smooth surface there. Stretch it over Ethafoam and batting. Tuck it in to the Ethafoam, much as I did with the tie-back before, in the baskets. And then simply glue it to the mount. That's the same head of this mount. And that's the hat that fits on it. You can note here that there's a split in the mount, different angles, and that just accommodates the hat brim. So I'm going to show you a bunch of women's hats. They were wonderful to work with because they were so complicated, and particularly the ones from the 20s, 30s, and 40s were just delight. So here's the mount, Ethafoam, Volaro, stockinette, and baccarat, and there's the hat. Another mount, similar materials. Note that the mount is raised quite a bit. There's a hat. And the reason for the raise is that many of these had veils. And so what we do is make the mount just high enough to let those veils relax, and yet still be supported right on the surface of the tray itself. There's a similar one. We used structurally a lot of this baccarat, fairly large dimension. I think that's 3-inch. So we have Volaro batting, stockinette, tie-back to support the hat. In this one, the stockinette is filled with batting, so it's kind of like a little soft pillow that then gets stuffed into the hairnet, sort of component of this hat. In this one, we used a little tie-back pillow on the top of the head portion so that we wouldn't have any snagging on the net. Kind of a wacky mount for kind of a wacky hat. Did I mention we had fun? It was like making layer cake sometimes. It's a good example of the stockinette stretched over batting and Ethafoam. In this case also, the hat brim is going to be supported with baccarat with Volaro glued right on top of it. I particularly like this mount because it reminds me of that hoopah basket mount with a double ring. Only in this case, the top ring is angled to support the angle in the hat itself. So note the ribbons. We had a lot of ribbons, and we rolled them. And these rolls that we constructed, this was pretty much directly from Denise McDale. Those rolls are made with Mylar. So what we would do is we'd take the Mylar, make a roll, and it'd be several turns in the roll, so it would have a lot of tension. And then skinny the Mylar roll into stockinette, tuck in the ends, and there's your roll. Then one of the nice features of this, if it needs to be a little larger, you can make it a little larger since the stockinette is stretchy. And here's a hat using those rolls to support the ribbons in place on the hat itself. So this is our finished storage. We have these cabinets here, but ran out of space for the hats, and so we purchased open shelving to go on top of the cabinets and made tie-dye curtains to protect from dust and light. And this is really this kind of little creation, and it's really served us well, so I wanted to mention it. We made a hem in the tie-dye and put magnets into the hem, strip magnets and also disc magnets, so that if you access any of the hats, you can simply raise them up and they'll stick to the top, or set them aside. So in conclusion then, all of these objects got their mounts, and our primary purpose was, of course, to stabilize and support these objects for the long term. But secondary, and it turns out equally important, was just to be able to access everything for our researchers and our staff. So that was very successful for us, as well as having secure and efficient storage. Like many others, we have space issues. And then finally, the point of being able to have these beautiful objects in their mounts happily without having to handle them all the time, so that they can last as long as we can possibly make them last. What's our goal? Yeah, thank you very much.